Alyse, and welcome to the Make Life Rich Movement podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
Everyone, we are speaking with Alyse Dusseault today. She is someone that I was connected with a few months back, and I've been really enamored with her story and her journey ever since. And I'm just so excited that we will get to talk with her today on all things Reiki, mediumship, her grief coaching, as well as her personal loss that sent her on this journey. And you are also the host of the Grief Awakening podcast, which is, guys, a really beautiful show that does give you a very intimate portrayal of the inner workings of growing through grief. And Alyse not only shares her story, she also speaks with others and their particular experiences with grief and what they've come to learn afterwards. And I'm such a fan of your proclivity for signs, so I'm very excited to talk about that today too. But all in all, we are in for a very beautiful and deep conversation. And I'll just say this, trigger warning for anyone who is recently or deeply in a place of grief. You may want to take this episode with care. So without further ado, Alyse, thank you so much. I know that we meet under somewhat heavier circumstances to what led you on your journey, but your journey is so beautiful, and I thank you so much for sharing it because it is something so intimately kind of rooted in who you are and what you've been through. I would love to start with how you met your fiance, Jared. He sounded like the life of the party, super cool dude. He certainly made you smile from ear to ear and still does right now. So tell us about how you guys met.
Yeah, he really does. Just even when people like say his name, like I feel like there's a part of me that just like lights up inside for a moment because I don't surprisingly get to talk about him all that often. I'm like my eyes are starting to water. I don't know.
It's okay. Go ahead. I'm already crying for you, so we're here.
Yeah. Real quick, I don't know if people are you recording the video too?
Mm-hmm.
There's a picture of you behind you and I can see there's like a silhouette of like someone with a backwards hat. And I was looking at it as you were talking because that's like literally how Jared would always look, his backwards hat. So I just love that. But yeah, our story really began in June of 2015. We met on a dating app, Tinder, which is so common now, right? Like everyone's on a dating app. If you're single, you're probably on a dating app. But back then it was still a very new thing. And so we connected on there. I think that was when we like first started, talking really. It was like early 2015. And then we didn't actually go out on a date with each other until like fall. It was like October of that year. Cause I was so nervous about going out with somebody on the internet. Yeah. Like
You're
a lot
like,
of people now like meet up
gonna
after
kidnap me?
a couple exchanges, but I was like very hesitant. But it ended up being the best decision I ever made. And over the next 5 years together, we really just kind of built a life together. And we got engaged in March of 2018. And I would have thought initially that by the time before he passed that we would have already been married. But honestly, like we really just kind of like sat in that little happy place of engagement for a really long time. And you're married, like, the pressures that come with being engaged and everyone wanting to know, like, when's the wedding? Like, what are you doing? When's the big day? Where is it going to be? All of that. Like, that was a lot for us. And so we kind of just sat with, let's just be happy being engaged for a while. And then, of course, like COVID happened very quickly. And then it was like, okay, any thoughts we had about maybe getting married this year are now kind of like out the window if we want to do it in like a big way. So we had kind of just planned on possibly like eloping. That was our plan for our anniversary that October. We were going to go to Hawaii and elope. Unfortunately, that never got to happen. On June 11th of 2020, Jared was killed by a drunk driver in a head-on collision. Fortunately, I was not in the car with him. If I was, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today. That's kind of how intense this accident was. And I feel like that day was just kind of like any other day. We both went to work, or I was working at home at the time. He went to work, came home, We went to the gym, and then that evening he decided to go spend some time at his brother's house. And it was on his way home from there that the incident happened. And there was just me being at home. There was something that like just shifted. Like I almost like I knew that something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
As it got later and later in the evening, I hadn't heard from him, calling a whole bunch of times and it just kind of going to voicemail. I remember like sitting there and Googling accidents in the area just to see, like, let me just look and see. This is probably crazy, but let me just look and
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing this like really like high up image taken from like a helicopter or something of a traffic cam, and it was the actual accident. But it was so blurry, you couldn't make out what the vehicles were. There was no details about like what kind of cars they are, who was involved. And so I kind of just told myself, like, you're crazy, go to sleep. Like, he gets in late all the time when he's hanging out with his buddies, he'll be fine. And I was awoken the next day around like 5 a.m. with the call. So it was like, that was my first, I think, experience with like intuition, in a sense of it, like something really just like nudging you, like, hey, look at
Mm-hmm.
this, look at this. But not really knowing to trust that or listen to it. And so it probably wouldn't have made any difference if I had known sooner.
Yeah.
Right. Like what happened happened. Um, but I feel like that was the first glimpse of what was to come for me,
Yeah.
as far as like growing my intuition and like being really tuned in and tapped on, as people call it. Um, and so that was the beginning of my grief journey.
Huh.
And I don't know about you, Sarah, but I feel like at the beginning I really just longed for my person. I just really longed for that connection that I had with him.
Yeah.
And so I began talking to him just kind of in the shower, on long car rides. I took a lot of road trips because I just needed to like get away, for a weekend or a couple weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And over time, I would start hearing like what he would say, almost as like little whispers in my ear,
Yeah.
responses. And soon enough, like I started to really trust that voice, and I felt like I truly was like feeling him again and connecting with him. I would hear like him make little jokes when I would, talk to him. I'm like, yep, that's what he would say.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until that Christmas of 2020 I read the book Signs by Laura Lynn Jackson. I don't know
Mm.
if you've ever read it, but it's been a huge part of my journey. I feel like it really catapulted me into even more connection. So I highly recommend that book to anyone who's grieving.
Yeah.
Um, I started asking Jared for signs and immediately started receiving them. And that just further like validated everything I was experiencing. And I turned it into kind of like a fun thing that we share together. I asked for a sign and I see how long it'll take him to like dream it up, bring it to fruition.
Yeah.
And that's how I continue to connect with him going forward. And it's been
Wow.
such a blessing.
Wow. Man, I think there's like a pre-grief you and a post-grief you.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Pre-grief me, I don't know about you, but pre-grief me knew that there was something special afoot that like made this whole place work. I'm not particularly religious. We weren't raised that way, so I don't have that as like a foundation. And it wasn't truly until the minute my dad died, I could feel almost like even closer to him, because it's like he wasn't in a body anymore. Like it was like he was able to kind of go through me. I felt him leave. We were bedside with him when he passed away. I felt him leave his body and leave the room. And it's a feeling that I feel just a little smaller when signs are present. And I'm like, oh, wow, look at that. Haha. And I'll feel that feeling that almost feels like when you're meditating, you get your chakras a little warmed up. Like there's a transference happening of some sort. And I felt really crazy in the beginning of his passing to like, I'm like, girl, you are so messed up in your head right now. You don't know what's going on. And then I think it was just me having to come back to that moment where I realized, like, okay, he's no longer here on this planet. I need to find him.
Mhm.
And that sounds like such an illogical thing to believe that you can achieve to someone that hasn't lost someone. But when you have, it becomes your only mission. And I love that that mission um, for you seemed to have come quite early on in your grief, which I can only imagine was Jared just giving you that medium so that you could have this relationship still with each other.
Yeah.
And it's just so beautiful to see someone lean into that and really make it something they believe in, because I can see a lot of people, kind of just saying, no, like your head's doing that for you because you're so sad right now. Like it's not
Yeah.
real, but it is real.
Yeah.
It is real when you realize it is real.
Thank you for mentioning that piece of it though, because that certainly was there. Like, just like you said, like, I'm losing my mind. Am I losing my mind right now? Like, asking yourself that quite
Yeah.
frequently. And then feeling so excited about this thing that you feel like you've discovered, right? I feel like I stumbled upon this like secret that no one had told me, that I can continue to connect with my loved ones in spirit. And yet being so excited, sharing it with people, and then it not being met with like the same excitement. People more meeting you with like concern of like, are you okay?
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't seem healthy. This doesn't seem normal. And so there was a period of time where I felt like I had to keep all of that really close to me and just keep it close to my heart and not share it with everybody, but maybe only share it with the people who I knew would be receptive to that.
Yes.
And knowing that, me moving forward and just almost like in a leading by example way of like, if people see that I'm happy and then I am doing quite well for what I've just gone through, then maybe they will eventually understand this piece, or just not even, if they don't understand it, maybe they'll just at least support that, like,
Yeah.
this is what's getting me through. So, like,
Yeah.
why not let me just keep doing it, what I'm doing, right?
Yeah. I wonder, it was so beautiful to learn that you and your fiance's family are very close. You ended up buying a house with your brother-in-law and his wife. And I wonder, in those moments of kind of finding these little breadcrumbs that Jared was leaving you, was there anyone else within the family that was also kind of feeling these intuitive pangs of where they're like, no, he's here. I know he's here. Like he did that. Like, did you guys get to share any of those kinds of moments together?
Yeah, I feel like more so. Um, well, let me first explain that Jared's family grew up very, very religious. So he was raised like very strict Southern Baptist in the church. And so a lot of that stuff was not accepted,
Mhm.
right? But I will say, so you mentioned my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, Jared's older brother Jason and his wife Lauren, who I just love so dearly to this day. They're a huge part of my life. Um, my sister-in-law Lauren and I became, well, we were friends before, but we really became like so insanely close through this journey. And we would confide in each other about the things that we were experiencing. And I remember her telling me at one point, she's like, I think I'm hearing Jared talk to me. I had been talking to him for a while at that point, right? And I remember her saying that to me for the first time. And I was like, really? I was like, what is he, like, tell me, like, what is he saying to you? And she would describe certain scenarios of where she's doing something and she can hear almost like a whisper from him. And I'm like, yep, that's exactly what I've been experiencing. And I almost felt for a moment, I felt like a little bit of jealous of like, wait, he's talking to you too? Like, what?
Yeah.
I want to talk to him. But I was just so happy that like someone else was getting it.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone else has maintained the same connection that I have.
Yeah.
And I do see a difference in the way that we all grieve the same person,
Yeah.
right? And what I'm doing is not going to work for everyone. And I recognize that.
Yeah.
But I also see that in a lot of instances, like I am able to tune into joy a lot more. And like anniversaries and birthdays and all the big holidays are a lot easier for me because I feel the connection, whereas maybe some of other family members don't tune
Yes.
into that.
Yeah. That resonates. That really resonates. And I'm so thankful you have that for yourself. I can imagine that it was helpful, although not absolutely in any way, shape, or form a replacement. But it is also special to know that he gets to live life with you
Mm-hmm.
throughout and keeping that relationship strong. Could you kind of help everyone to understand how you started to kind of develop this practice of, actually, let's step back. After, let's say, the first year, I'm sure for me, that was when things got really crazy. I don't know what that was like for you, but most people I speak with, it seems like after the first year, things get very interesting, and that's where a lot of things are pulled up. So could you tell us what, I guess that would be 2021?
Mm-hmm.
So what was that time frame like for you, and did you feel kind of pulled in a direction of knowing like, okay, I got to force myself into, or not force, but like kind of guide into a new way of dealing with this?
Yeah, for sure. Everyone always says like the second year is always the hardest when you're grieving. And I found that definitely to be true. Um, Even though, like I said, I was getting all of this, I was like starting to tap into all this connection. Like the 1 year mark still felt so big and so heavy. That period of like the whole month of June, which is already like, there's so much there. It's his death anniversary. My birthday was literally like the day after. Like there's a lot that's going on in
Oh
a week
no.
span there. And so June is always a really hard month for me. But just in that first year, I remember right after the anniversary going through a period of really like disconnect. Like I'd been feeling him for, the last 6 months, and all of a sudden it just stopped. And it's because I started experiencing all this anxiety that I had never felt before, kind of just came out of nowhere. And so I wasn't able to like tune into the connection as well as I had been, knowing that like he's there, he's still there. It's just like I'm not energetically able to tap into it because my focus is elsewhere. There was just a lot going on. Like you said, I had just bought a house. Like there was a lot of big changes happening in my life. And once I got through that period, Reiki was a huge help. That's where I discovered Reiki, actually. So I'll touch on that a little bit too. A friend had recommended I try Reiki, and I'd never heard of it. It's a form of Japanese hands-on healing. It's an energy healing technique, which really just truly like helps kind of rebalance your chakras, rebalance everything going on. It's like hitting the reset button on your energetic body, but helps with so many other things, physically, mentally, spiritually. Um, and I tried that for the first time, and the anxiety just completely went away. It dissipated, and I was suddenly like able to like connect in again. And so from there, from that point on, I was like, I feel really drawn to this. I need to figure out how I can tell other people about it and how I can help them experience the same thing, experience the same healing, experience the connection. And at the same time, I was finding like I didn't really have anyone in my world who I could talk to about grief. Like even my fiance's family, like we were all so close, they weren't grieving him in the same way that I was. And so I went to social media of all places, like somewhere that I was not active before, like post loss of Jared. Like I was on there every 6 months, posting something. Like I was not a social media person, but I suddenly felt drawn to go on there and talk about loss. And I was suddenly connected with all these people all over the world and in my close circle who I didn't even know who had experienced loss, telling me like, yes, I've experienced the same thing, or like, tell me more about that. Like, tell me more about the signs. People celebrating the signs and the connection rather than like pushing it away and telling me I'm crazy. So that was a huge shift for me, I think, of like starting to share my story. And it kind of just grew from there. And then, I got certified in Reiki. Like everything happened so fast. And literally like 6 months after that, I had opened my business. So it was like really, really fast where I alchemized all of this into, I know that I'm supposed to do this work and help others with this learning from this experience of loss.
It absolutely seems that way from the outside. Even your branding didn't feel like branding. It just felt like you were telling your story. And for me, that was, we were connected via a mutual friend, and I literally just had to read like 2 lines of your Instagram, and I was like, okay, yep, that's a yes for me. Like, good, we're great. That's fine. We'll just get it scheduled.
Yeah.
And there's a moment. it kind of felt like a, I'm so sorry, my nose is like running from all these tears, guys. I'll keep tissues nearby. I don't know why I don't have them today, but there felt like a moment for me, and there were some people that I was able to speak to when they were in their deepest periods of grief, and sometimes the earliest, where they said they could feel in the beginning the veil lifted, and they were very aware of reality and what is real and what is not, and what is a construct and what is not, and what our purpose is and what it's not. And then over time, it seems as though there's a collective depressive anxiety feeling that comes back in and starts to close up that veil. And I went through that myself, and I remembered having to lean into, I could feel it slipping away from me, and I could feel this gloom taking over. And I was like, no, 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 no. I need to stay in the light, like where this is what I want. This is where I feel like I'm healing. It took me, I started doing hot yoga. I felt like I just needed to wring myself clean because I just didn't like the stagnancy of, like, it felt like deadness. It was not mine. It was not me, but it was there. And I wonder, with your Reiki learning, did you yourself feel kind of that reclaiming of the lifting of the veil again, to where you could start to return to feeling the vibes and seeing the signs? Like, do you
Yeah.
think that that was part of the fortifying process of you becoming the new you?
Yeah. That's a great way to describe it. I feel like it was almost like I had to work through, I almost like had to go back into this old version of myself for a second. Like, I mean, she wasn't far away, right? That was just me a year and a half ago, right? But like I had to step back into that for a second and shed some stuff. And I think going to Reiki was like, okay, we're wiping her clean. Like I'm being wiped clean of all that heavy stuff that is no longer needed here because I'm stepping into this new version who doesn't tune into to that. You know, like but what you were saying about like it's almost like you go through this like things get deconstructed. Like what you thought about the world and life gets deconstructed. And
Mhm.
that is a very exciting but also confusing time.
Yeah.
And so there are ebbs and flows of like disconnect and connect. Like I'm feeling really connected to my loved one right now. And then also like I'm still a human and like I have to deal with life stuff, right? So like it's natural to have those ebbs and flows. If people are like even when your dad first passed, like you felt like, oh, I feel so good and connected, but then oh wait, like where did that go? It's going to come back around. It's just like we have to move through the ebbs and flows of being human and shedding stuff that we're supposed to heal. And I think that's really what that little span of period of disconnect was for me. And Reiki just helped me like pull me out of it, kind of.
Wonder, do you think that the Reiki, once you had gone through your transformation and then were regularly practicing it, did you find moments where you felt like you could take it a little further? Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but you were able to kind of play with like what you were going to make. Not it's not like, you said the word alchemy before, an alchemy of sorts, but did you find yourself being able to harness more and more energy over time because you kind of understood, like, familially, this makes sense to me, what we're doing here, this exchange? Like,
Yeah.
for anyone that has never had Reiki done, or you've never worked with someone with your energies, I just want to try and relate that energy and how you, as the practitioner, are really over time just getting more and more intuitive with your work.
Yeah, that there definitely was like a gradual shift that happened. Like when you first learn Reiki, I feel like just like with anything you were going to learn, if you're going to learn go to be like a hairstylist, right? You want to do everything like exactly how it was taught to you. And you're making sure everything's perfect, like the haircut's just right, like everything has to be perfect so that you can say like I did a good job, right? Reiki is very similar when you first start. It's like you are just trying to figure out the practice. And then I think after a little while, when you get comfortable with it, you start to bring in other things that maybe work for you, but not every other practitioner will do. Like I found that when I was working with clients, I could get almost like more tuned in if I started the session with guiding them through a meditation. Like if I could get them more relaxed, then I was able to like tune into the energy even deeper or something.
Mhm.
Like there was little things that came up over time that I started to implement that allowed me to almost provide a better experience. One of the things that started happening really quickly as soon as I started working with people is that their past loved ones would start to like visit during the meditation. And I had never connected with any other spirits except for Jared at this point. And so if you can imagine like working with someone and then you're like, I don't know, like I feel their energy, but there's something else here. I always describe it if like you're in a car and you're at a stop sign or like a red light and there's another car beside you and you can feel that they're looking at you. Like you just feel eyes are on you. That was the feeling of spirit coming through. It's like I can't see them, but I can feel that there's something else there. There's something else looking at me. And at first I didn't know what to do with that. Obviously. Like
Yeah.
I'm here to do Reiki. Like I kept saying like I'm not a medium. Like I'm not a medium. I just connect with my loved ones. Like that's for me. But it kept happening over and over. And I found that the people who were sitting with me were people who were also just experiencing loss or going through grief. And I think that was no coincidence.
Wow.
Right? Like the universe brought me the people who needed to get that specific healing that I would connect with, that we would resonate with each other. And I remember like the first time I decided to tell a client that I was like, did your mom pass? Like I was like so hesitant because I was so afraid people thinking I was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and it just took a few times of like just trusting what was coming through and having it validated that I was like, okay, this is happening. I need to decide what I'm going to do with this going forward. And luckily, I have a really amazing mentor here in Nashville. Her name is Kim Salter. And I worked with her a lot to kind of like harness that and figure out what connecting with spirit looks like for me. If I want to include that in Reiki or keep it separate, like all this stuff. So, yes, Reiki for many people starts out as one thing. It's almost like a door, it like opens a door to your intuition, I think, and your intuitive gifts, and like receiving Reiki or even just being attuned to it like cracks you open a little bit to experiencing all this other stuff.
It makes sense. And I was wondering if, kind of your heart being in that receptive place for Jared and other family members that you were speaking with, I almost wonder if, like, when we were little, like you would see like fortune tellers and then they'd show like the like B screen of like the ghosts in the back. They're like, no, let me at her. Let me at her. I gotta talk to them. I got it's like maybe you were that receiving energy that they're like, oh, we got a live one. Like everybody get over here, line up. Like here, we can talk to her now.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of those gifts that I think prior to my dad passing, we would watch Montel Williams together, and Sylvia Brown was like this
Mm-hmm.
prophetic, like very widely known medium. That was all I knew about mediums. We actually like went randomly to a taping and she told my dad to go to the doctor for something around here. And that was where his
Wow.
tumor was. And that was 2 years before he got sick. So that off the gate, I was already like, well, she's something. She knows something. And then we went again when I was like a teenager. And I just remember her saying things to people in the audience and their reactions. It was just like, there's no way possible with all these people picking them from all over, taking like people from behind the video camera. And she's like, your uncle Larry? And he's like, yes. Like there was that gigantic showboaty end of it. And then there are the people that walk amongst us like you that are normal individuals that just are touched and have this telephone line to the other end that
Mm-hmm.
certainly came at a cost. This is not a gift that you've been given lightly. There's great suffering that came to you being exposed to this thing we all have access to. But I wonder when you were kind of tiptoeing into the moments of like, am I a medium? Like, what's going like, is this like a 2.0 of like the brain fog, like from grief? Like, what the fuck is happening here? Because I feel a little scared to say out loud that like I might be talking to dead people that aren't related to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, was that the moment for you where you're like, whoa, like you're not my family. Why are you speaking to me? Like this feels a little.
Yeah. There was definitely those moments constantly questioning myself, like, am I actually going crazy?
Yeah.
It took me even after like spirit first started coming in Reiki sessions, it probably took me a whole nother like year and a half to 2 years to ever use the words I'm a medium. So I don't take this gift, this ability, whatever you want to call it, lightly. Like it's been a journey to get there because especially working with people in grief, like I'm never going to just be like, there are people in the world who I do believe prey on people who are have just lost someone, who are grieving, right? Like your emotions are very high, you're
100%.
very vulnerable. As someone who's gone through it, I will never use that gift to take advantage of others, especially like someone who has just lost a loved one. Like I've been there, right? So it took me, I was so hesitant to use those words and to like truly like show up as that if I wasn't like 100% knew that I was connecting, right? Like I was like, I need to know that this is like actually real before I ever come to anybody with something, right? So it took a very long time. And at the same time, like it was so like gentle and slow. It wasn't like what you were describing of like I'm open for business and like every spirit in the universe is just coming at me like let me talk to him. I want to talk to my person. It like it
Yeah.
wasn't like that. It was so gentle, like very like almost this feeling of if you could imagine just like one person coming to you and it's like this softness. It was never it's so hard to describe, but it was never overwhelming. And I think that Jared had a huge hand in that because
Yeah.
I know that some people do describe that as their experience. Like all of a sudden, they were a medium one day and just spirits were knocking on their door 24/7. I think because I have great boundaries and also I had Jared helping me on the other side, like he helped me make this process really slow and gradual. And so it started really, really gently. And now it has worked up to the point of like, I only connect with spirit when I want to. Spirit, I'm not walking around the grocery store and spirits are knocking on my door. Like they know I'm closed for business. Like the only time I'm connecting with spirit is by choice. And that's when I'm
Yeah.
sitting one on one with somebody in a very sacred, special container.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And that makes a lot of sense. So when you say they're coming in softly, the first thing that popped in my mind was like maybe you're like walking like on a beach and it's like not too hot of a day and the wind's blowing perfectly and you like look over and you see a little happy seagull floating and then you just feel like warmth and you're like everything's right. Like that
Mm-hmm.
was the vibe that came in mind. That's what I would hope I would feel if my dad came back. That like I feel like that would be the identifier for me. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like overwhelming like, "Oh wow, okay, like this is you, you're here." But what do you typically tell like you do work with people for the aspect of helping them to connect with their loved ones and you have a few different ways in which you do that. I would love to get into the specific grief container a little bit later, but for now on the mediumship end, what do you tend to tell people before you engage in this work with them? Like, how do you go about explaining what the experience might be like, since I'm sure it has to be different for every single person?
Yeah, absolutely. So some people I sit with, it's their first time having a reading ever. And
Yeah.
some people I sit with, they've had a reading before, but maybe it didn't go that well, or like it wasn't a great experience. And some people have had hundreds of readings, or not
Oh,
hundreds, but tons of them. I'm like,
yeah.
okay. So everyone, I always start with that. Like, what's your experience? And then I go from there. I always explain to people how spirit speaks to me so that they will understand during the session where I'm getting information from. So I always explain with that I'm a clairvoyant medium, which means spirit shows me visuals in my mind's eye, almost like a movie. And I'm also sentient, which means that spirit makes me feel things physically, my body, and emotionally. So as I'm talking to someone, I'll say things like, I feel like, and I'll explain a scenario that their loved one is showing me or giving me the feeling of. And all of this, all these clairs, have you heard of the clairs before?
I just read a book about them like
Okay.
2 months ago or 3 months ago, right before finding you. So
Okay.
I'm slightly aware of what you're talking about right now.
Yeah. So for those listening who are like, what? The clairs, like never heard of
Yeah.
it. Clairvoyance is your clear vision. Clairsentience is clear feeling. Clear audience is clear hearing. So be able to hear spirit in your mind or in your like little whispers, like I was talking about earlier with Jared. And then there's a few others that are like not as common, but clairgustance, which is clear smell. And
Mm.
then clear salience is clear smell, clear gustance is clear taste. So be able to
Mm.
like taste something in your mouth very suddenly.
Wow.
So those are a little bit more rare, but usually the clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairsentience are the main three. And so all of those senses work together in combination for spirit to be able to communicate. They're using the tools that I have available to me to be able to portray their messages.
Mhm.
Um, that's kind of how it starts. I always like I almost have like spirit like knows that I have a process. So they always show me first if they're male or female, they show me their relationship to the person I'm sitting with, they show me how they died. And I have parameters around that. Like I obviously don't need to know all of the details if it was something very tragic. But they'll typically show me like where in their body they felt or what where in their body was like if it was an illness where it was that caused their passing. And so I kind of just give all those little examples to start a session to explain like this is how they're going to speak to me and it's my job as best I can to explain to you what's coming through. So I try to explain and not interpret
Yeah.
because something I might interpret as one thing might mean something completely else to a client.
Yeah.
And so it's not my job to interpret the information, it's my job just to just deliver it, right?
Wow.
So that's kind of the process. it's
Wow.
really it's really fun.
Does it feel like pop-up windows in like your brain to where you're like, "Oh, there's a thought. Oh,
Yeah, it's almost like a screen, like a movie screen, if you could
yeah.
imagine like being like a projector
Yeah.
in your mind. For me, like spirit always comes through on one side. So my left side, I'll feel and see spirit on my left side. And then my intuitive information or my psychic information comes in on my right. So if something comes in on the right, I know it's about something that's happening in real time with the client. Um, if it's coming in on the left, I know it's a message from spirit.
Wow. Man. Layers on layers. It's so beautiful. It's so cool.
It's a lot to unpack and
Yeah.
explain to someone who hasn't experienced it.
Yeah.
But I think we all experience these things in micro moments,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, like walking on the beach and feeling your dad close to you,
Yeah.
like that softness. It's like this feeling of like love that suddenly comes in really
Yeah.
quickly. And you're like, oh,
Yeah. I
okay.
usually
That's what it
hysterically
is.
cry. Like
Yeah.
it overtakes me. And I'm like, wow, you're here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It is interesting. The thing that was so apparent to me was that, oh, wow, we're literally just energy. And like the thought process of me thinking energy can't reach me wherever I'm at when like we know there's studies where we've like sent pings of energy out to the ends of the universe or whatever we can reach. And like there's something to energy. And what I really loved about your work was that when someone is in a space and they do feel ready to work with the energy that they're getting, it does feel like when you're going through a grief process, if you're open to it, there are a lot of downloads that I'm sure can be very overwhelming to like decipher while also trying to live a real life and then like not be like depressed or like have weird thoughts about like driving yourself into a tree. I don't know if you dealt with that at all, but there was always a moment where I'd be like, wow, if like my car just careened into this tree right now, I wouldn't have to feel this way anymore. And that'd be great. Not that I wanted to kill myself, but it was just like your brain takes you in so many
Mm-hmm.
tailspins. And I love so much that you created a grief support container. I would have given every penny I had it and given you like my firstborn name if something like this would have been available when I was in this place because I had to rely on reading books and the internet and just
Mm-hmm.
sitting with myself a lot and crying. And it would have been really cool to have someone to not lead, but gently support through all the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs and the changes. So, could you tell us a little bit about your mission behind kind of helping others to you call it reigniting the connection with the loved one that they lost. And can you just walk us through like what it looks like to go through this container?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say too, like when I was in those first 6 months, like the books and the internet and podcasts, and that's all I had as well. And
Yeah.
so I'm with you. Like I wish that I had been shown something like this a lot
Yeah.
sooner, but obviously it was like up to me to discover this
Yeah.
and able to be able to provide it for others. But Reignite was a container, is a container that I created for people who are like the traditional grief stuff, like grief therapy, which is totally beautiful and I'm sure very needed for most people, or
Yeah.
like grief groups, online groups, all of that just like is not working because the thing that you, even though you can talk about your loss, the thing that you're needing the most is just like you just want your person back. You you just want some piece of them back into your life, bring them back into the present, right? Instead of talking about them all the time in the past tense, which is what everyone is doing around you. Reignite is going to teach people how to create a new relationship with their loved one. Like, what is that? Okay, you knew what it was before, and now it's shifted. What does that look like going forward? And how can we keep tuning into that to move forward with them? Right?
Yeah. I love
Everyone wants
that.
us to move on. We're not doing
No.
that.
No.
We're going to move forward and hold them, carry them with us.
Yes.
So this container is kind of like a go at your own pace. So for some people, most people, I usually work with them for about a 3 month span, but it can be anywhere from like 3 to 6 months if that's how long it's going to take. And it includes one-on-one coaching sessions with me where I'm teaching you essentially the process that I went through in my discovery of my connection with Jared, but in a much shorter span of time so that you can start tuning in right away. So we're talking about signs, we're talking about our intuition, we're talking about visitation dreams and what those feel like. We're talking about navigating our changing relationships around us, especially when it comes to establishing that connection, right? We're talking about there's so much like even releasing fear around like what if this connection doesn't continue? Like what if everything I'm feeling is not, it's not forever? Like how am I going to move forward? Like do I have fears around that? Um there's so much packed in, but it also includes the energy work. So a Reiki session, mediumship reading, because I feel like starting with that mediumship reading like really starts gets them that little piece of connection right away
100%.
and helps you get excited about continuing it going forward. So that's included
Yeah.
too. Yeah, it's been a little over a year that I've been working in this container in that form, and it's been really really beautiful to see the transformations. I mean, I've sat with women who, most of my clients are women because that's just who's gravitated towards me, but I've sat with a lot of women who have lost partners,
Mm.
specifically lost parents as well, but like a lot of people who have lost partners I've sat with just even like 2 weeks after they've lost their partner, they're signing up for this container. And I'm like,
Wow.
I'm so amazed and enamored by them and like so just shocked by how they could have this. It's almost like they have the courage to step into something like this right away and begin working on this and like
Yeah.
working on getting better and moving forward.
Yeah.
But the transformations I see in these people in such a short amount of time is mind blowing to me, and I'm just constantly blown away. I just sat with a lot of these women become my friends because we get so close in this
Yeah.
3 month span together. I just sat with one of them for last night. Last night we had dinner together, and she just passed her 1 year mark of losing her partner. And she was explaining to me, she was like, I don't know where I would be without this connection that I've established. And hearing that from her just feels very validating, but also makes me so happy that she's been able to continue that on her own. And, you know, she's dating someone new and she's telling me all this great stuff that's happening for her. And it just,
Yeah.
it makes everything that I've gone through not, I don't want to say worth it, but it makes it, it gives it meaning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Not in vain. It wasn't in vain.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense. And it's so It's not surprising to me they would sign up that early. I think I definitely would have done the same. Maybe not 2 weeks. I could see myself in a month or 2 months being "Ah," like my dad was my best friend. I'm sure for you it was the same of
Mm-hmm.
a month or 2 out, you're driving down the street feeling somewhat normal, and then you're like, "Oh, let me ask if they want me to pick them up anything from the," and then you text, and then you're
Yeah.
like, "My brain forgot you're dead." I hate this.
Mm-hmm.
And then knowing that, especially if they're familiar with your work, that there is an option. And not only the option to cultivate that connection again, but to give yourself hope and belief again. Because I think
Yeah.
the grief that accompanies the finality of it all, especially if it was something sudden, like for you, it just, there has to be such a catch up for your brain and your wiring and the way you just go through absolutely everything. And I can see this almost being a really beautiful way too to rewire your brain in a softer, more loving, centered space instead of fear and loss and just, it's not like it's negative, but
Mm-hmm.
just the lack of it all can
Yeah.
really pin you down in a way that feels very alienating and already makes a hard time harder. So I love that your work is available for those that are in the space that are ready to move. And I absolutely was just flabbergasted and so thankful that you make it a flexible container for the time, because I would imagine, one may be feeling great one week and
Mm-hmm.
to the next. You just never know. So it really does show the level of understanding and care and empathy that you're putting into your work when you are working with others in such a delicate time. Doing so in a way that is, there are death doulas, there are people that stick around afterwards, there are grief doulas, and they seem to be more I haven't come across anyone like you that is working on the spiritual aspect of things. It's been more of a beautiful, strong hug and a good hand that's going to hold you to get through closing bank accounts. Like, how do I return this car? There's all the antics that really do plague a grief period when all of these things should not even be a thought or something you have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you've created this space where people can tend to the most important things that grief should allow you to explore rather than worrying about crap.
Yeah.
All of the crap.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to talk very briefly about your dream visits. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to link the show notes to your episode where you walk them through the meditation for that. But tell us a little bit about dream visitations. I'm so thankful for you that you've had some. I haven't had any yet, and I would love to
Really?
learn more. Yeah,
Oh my
I'm really
gosh.
surprised by it, actually.
I'm
It's,
surprised too. Okay.
yeah.
Um, Dream visitations are the coolest thing ever. And also for some people, depending on where you're at, there can be hard moments of being in a dream state, being visited by your loved one, and then waking up and realizing it was just a dream. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that's not hard. That is super hard, and I've been there. But one thing that was happening to me very early on is I kept having these dreams where I was looking for Jared. Like I kept going to sleep, and they would be like stressful dreams where I felt like I never saw him, but I knew I was looking for him, like he was missing. And those are not visitation dreams. So there's a couple different types of dreams I'm going to go through real quick. So the traditional visitation dream is where you actually see or feel your loved one and you can physically see them. You might not speak to them. There might just be like an unspoken exchange, but you physically see them and feel them with you, right? Another type of dream is what I call a release dream, which is what I was just describing. It's like your body's way of going through things you're not able to process in real time, but doing it while you're asleep. So that feeling of me looking for Jared was what I experienced that night that he passed. This feeling of like, he's not answering his phone, he's missing, like, where is he? And I even felt that even after I got the call that he had died, I was still feeling like that. I was like, this isn't true. They've got the wrong person. Like, where is he? So I think that was my body's way of processing what I couldn't while I was awake and
Yeah.
doing it in a dream state. And that's very common early on. That's what most people experience. Um, But once you can get to past that kind of stuff and get into the visitation space, it's so, so cool. I have some tips for people. You mentioned you'll like link the episode. I think I mentioned them on my podcast. There's a few episodes on dreams there as well. I want to say like one of the first ones might be episode like 3 or 4. I talk about visitation dreams a little more deeply, but there are tips that I share with my clients on like how to call in more visitation dreams. But the biggest part of it is like a lot of people don't remember their dreams. I don't know if you've noticed that. Like maybe it's very possible that you have been visited, but you don't remember them. And so I always tell my clients to just start writing down any dream that you have. Even if it's not a visitation dream, begin the process of writing down and recalling your dreams, or even just recalling like how you feel when you woke up. Like write that down, jot it down, get a notes app going in your phone where you just talk about your dreams. Beginning to flex that muscle of remembering little details will help when the actual visitation dream comes. But there's this little like mantra that I'll say before I go to sleep sometimes that helps to call in a visitation dream. And I don't know how, but it works. It's not foolproof because we can't control our dreams, but it works a lot. Yeah. So that is, I will like actually speak out loud. I'm like lying in bed. I'll speak out loud and say, I'll address Jared, or you can say dad. And I'll say, tonight, let's go on an adventure in my dreams and make a memory worth remembering in the morning. And I'll say it like once or twice. And then I'll just go to sleep, and somehow like it's like it's an invitation for them to come in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So simple and so beautiful.
Yeah.
Literally.
And like even for you, do you feel like if you were to see your dad physically, would that be really hard for you or make you emotional?
We were literally best friends. Like I came out of my mom looking for my dad because he talked to me like in the womb. So I feel like I've known him through so many planes of existence. But it has felt weird to me that he's never come to me in a dream that I can recall. I do really remember a good amount of my dreams, but I think where I may be at, he was ill for 27 years. It was a long period of watching someone die very slowly and painfully. And I think I'm still unpacking a lot of like what you were saying with looking for him and releasing that fear. I think I've got a lot of emotion that may be blocking. I don't know if that's a thing, but I feel like I have a lot of dreams about that period of life, but mainly from my perspective of just like, ooh, like feeling all the trauma attached with it. But I loved the way in which you kind of calling in the person. I have tried a few times to say like, Dad, like show me like where you're like riding your motorcycle in the galaxy tonight. Like take me there in my dreams. Like just like want to go with you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Those tears are so warranted and welcome. I feel like I've experienced with some clients that like if seeing like if you were to go into a meditation and visualize your dad, if that image of being there with him makes you very emotional in a not in a happy way, but in a that feels really hard and painful.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I think our loved ones are very mindful of that. And will maybe not show up for you in that way until they know that you're ready to receive it. And even though, 6 years has passed, you might not be ready to see him that way.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. It's so strange, these maybe self-inflicted parameters that I put on myself, but I take such great respect for the work that you do because there's just so many nuances, and it just seems like it all comes down to trust and trusting yourself and knowing that what you're thinking and feeling is what you're thinking and feeling it is. And I think part of what drew me so much to wanting to have a conversation with you was the fact that you are a bridge, and you gave yourself the label of accepting that, and through that it seems like you have really truly gained a very large understanding of how, at the very least, we can help ourselves to feel better on this side. And that for me was the one thing that I wanted to make sure we got across in this episode, because as we said, we had to like basically like navigate Google and like hope that the algorithm was going to take pity on us and give us like throw us a little bone to like help for the day. But it's so the amount of change in the grief space over the last few years brings me such comfort. And
Yeah.
although we miss that boat, I'm so thankful that there are practitioners out there like you that are absolutely pouring your heart out for all of us to recognize and register that part in ourselves, and then take this step if we feel inclined to work with you and develop that deeper. I think, I love that I haven't had him in a dream yet, and you have. I love that you have clients that have. Like, there's a spectrum
Mm-hmm.
along all things. And I think I wouldn't want anyone to get their hopes up that a certain thing is going to happen. As you said, like, it's going to come for you as it's supposed to and evolve. But it just goes to show you that there are such universal things that we all have in common. But again, it is going to just come down to you and your journey and what's meant for you and the time that it's meant for you. And um, I just am so thankful for you doing what you're doing. And I thank you for sharing this gift with others and just awakening people to the hope that just even visiting someone in their dreams is an option for them. I know for sure I'm excited for bedtime tonight, like the best way possible.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I know that you're doing such beautiful work for so many people. And this is just the very beginning for you. And I literally can't imagine what is next, but I'm so excited to watch and see what comes of this for you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sarah. That is so, so kind. And you're such an eloquent speaker also. Let
Oh,
me just
thank
say
you.
that. Like, I'm like, wow, like everything that you're saying. I'm like, it's hard. Sometimes like you're so close to it that you can't see the impact or like what you do if it truly, like, I question like, is this really helping anyone, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just talking about my experience, right? But like if I put myself back in my own shoes 4 years ago, what
Yeah.
would I have needed?
Yeah.
And I think that something like this is it, you know?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. The my mentor in my head, Ed Milet, says that you're best suited to help the person you were when you had your biggest
Mm,
problem. And
yeah.
I think it's most entrepreneurs that I end up speaking with and the ones that I kind of gravitate towards, they're all doing that for others. And it's such a beautiful thing for me to be able to share others' journeys because, you know, whether it's an ice cream maker or a grief coach and Reiki practitioner, and like there's just so many ways in which just sharing your story opens so many others up to how they can fully live. And I think the grief space for me was just such a place plagued with such deep sorrow. It was hard to see how there would be room for light and for happiness and abundance and joy and feeling all of these things. But as you said earlier, like, you are so much more available to joy when you are in this place of grief. And I want to encourage anyone that is in a space right now, no matter when your person passed or wherever you find yourself in your grief journey, please follow Alyse. All of the links are in the show notes. I think you're really going to be not only very excited to kind of dive into her content, her podcast, but I think there is a lot of room for you to find support within her offerings and absolutely to kind of tune into the community that you've created. You have so many wonderful comments on all of your posts. It's just, I hope you're so proud of what you've built. And um, it's just, I'm very thankful to know you now, and I am thankful for your time and your energy. But I have one final question before I
Yeah.
send you on your way,
Yeah.
before I
Yeah.
forget. I asked all of my guests this. Alyse, how do you make your life rich?
I believe that I make my life rich through exactly what you were just talking about, which is like choosing to tune in through joy instead of pain and finding moments in every day
Yeah.
where I can tune into a little bit of joy, whether that be making my morning espresso shot and just like savoring that little moment of like
Yeah.
quiet time with my coffee, or going for a walk and petting an adorable dog on the street. Like, I look for little moments of joy in any moment I can, every moment that I can, because I think I know how quickly that can be taken away, and it's hard to tune back into it. It takes a lot of time and energy and effort, and I feel so good to be back in that place.
Oh, so beautiful. That definitely registers. Thank you so much, Alyse. This was so beautiful. Everyone, sorry for all of the sniffles and snot. My apologies. I'll keep
I'm sure
tissues close.
they'll be sniffling right along with us, so it's okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Sniff along so that Fernando doesn't have to edit out all of my sniffs. But Alyse, thank you so, so much. And I'm sure this is not going to be the last time we speak. So I'll see you soon.
Absolutely not. I'll see you soon. Thanks, Sarah.